Alright, so here's your Fleck 5600 SXT control valve. You'll notice that it comes with a few fittings here. You're going to get your drain bar that goes threads onto the back of the unit, which we'll discuss later. You'll get a few fittings that connect your brine line from the salt tank to the valve as well, which we'll discuss and show you how that all goes together. There's one part here we don't recommend using, and that's this little screen here. We don't think you need that. There's a screen internally, gets backwashed with the softener, so we recommend just tossing that out. You may or may not also get this upper collector from the manufacturer. This goes on the bottom of the valve. We do not recommend using it. This is for what they call an upflow application, hooking your softener up backwards. We recommend you, if you did receive one of these, we hope you didn't, we asked them not to send it, but if you did, we ask you to also throw that out. So here are the parts that we are going to use concerning the Fleck 5600 SXT valve. Your yoke where you plumb into, your bypass, obviously the valve itself, your drain fitting there, and then your fittings for your brine line. You're also going to get another batch of fittings here. This is your what's called a brine well. This is going to go in your salt tank. I'm going to show you how this goes together. There's a cap there, there's an overflow elbow, and then a safety float as well. So now we've also got a few other things you're going to need to get yourself here. So here are some basic tools required to put this together. You're also going to need a hose clamp here to hold your drain line on. Here's a picture of the drain line. You can see there the drain line does not come with it. Everybody's drain is a different distance away. They could never guess how much to send. So it's just 1/2 inch clear poly tubing you can get from any hardware store. So yeah, you can use that also if you do hook up your overflow elbow on your drain for your salt tank there. But this is definitely be mandatory, at least for one part, on the softener head. All right, now we've kind of gone over the parts here for the head. We're going to go ahead and show you how to lubricate the O-rings on the bypass and the yoke here. And here we're using a commercial grade potable water lubrication. But you could certainly use standard cooking oil from home. You don't need a special lubrication to do that. So there we go, and we're going to show where this attaches to the back of the head here. So we've got to put some O-rings, grease on here. Like I said, you can just use standard cooking oil as well, works great. Just want to make sure we're lubricating those. So we're going to go ahead and get the bypass on here. You'll notice it's held on by these metal clips. The main thing we want to say about these metal clips is that they do not hold the water back. So when we tighten those back on, just barely snug is more than tight enough. The O-rings will hold the water back. We've had people actually over tighten these screws here, and that's a big no-no because that could actually puncture through the plastic. So just barely snug is snug enough. So here we go, that's how that attaches. And we'll attach the other side. And another quick note, the bypass is showing in service right now, but we'll want these closed so we can show how these close. Go ahead and turn those to bypass before you hook it up. And also a quick note while we're here, we're going to point out the arrows. So that's the arrow pointing in. That should be the plumbing coming in from your well or your city into the softener. The arrow pointing out should be going back to the home. All right, we're also going to need to connect our yoke, male threaded yoke here that we're going to tie our plumbing into from the home. And let's go ahead and goes on the exact same way as the bypass. And once again, we can't stress enough, just barely snug on those screws. We definitely don't want to, over tighten those and puncture right through that plastic. So just snug is perfect. Once again, the O-rings are going to hold the water back. As soon as we get this clip on, we want to show this was engineered to have some up and down play. Sometimes people are concerned that, hey, this is moving up and down, it's going to leak. No, it was designed that way for the plumbing to have a little bit of up or down to it. So that's perfectly normal. That's what we actually want to see here. All right, next we're going to add the drain barb here. Notice we had some Teflon tape. It does not come with the Teflon tape on it, so just a couple wraps on that's pretty good. And then we just kind of want to snug that in. Once again, we don't want to muscle this in. It is plastic on plastic, so you can put a wrench on it, get it a little snug, but definitely don't muscle it. Don't try to over tighten it. Just snug it up will be perfect. All right, so now we're going to discuss the mineral tank portion of the video here. Most of the units, 64,000 grain or smaller, typically ship loaded with the resin in the tank. So that part is already done for you actually. So your tank's going to have a little bit of weight to it. A lot of times it will actually ship inside of the salt tank. So don't be sure to double check your box there if you're missing a salt tank. And we'll have this nifty little cap on here for shipping, so we'll go ahead and remove that off of there for you. You'll notice you've got a riser tube in there. That's the pipe down the middle of the tank that our valve is actually going to sit onto and hand tighten onto the tank. Okay, so if you have a softener, 80,000 grains or bigger, more than likely it's not going to ship loaded. It's too big, so we send this handy dandy funnel width, which you'll simply place on the tank. You'll see a little tube called the riser tube that runs down the middle of the tank. You're going to want to put tape on top of it before you pour or scoop the resin into the tank. I prefer to scoop it, think it's a little bit easier. We send the proper amount of resin width. You'll notice it doesn't fill the tank. There's something called freeboard, usually about half or 2/3 up the tank. It's a space the resin needs to expand during backwash. So the tank should not and will not fill all the way up with resin. Once you're done, remove the funnel, the tape, back off the riser tube, and then you can hand tighten the valve back onto the tank. All right, next we're going to go ahead and hand tighten the valve onto the tank. We want to make sure we lubricate this big old O-ring on the bottom of the valve here. Like we said, you can certainly use standard cooking oil. That works great too. There's also an internal O-ring that can use some lubrication as well. We're going to go ahead and just hand tighten the valve onto the tank. No Teflon tape here, no pipe dope, just an O-ring seal. So the key here is, once again, don't over tighten. I mean, barely snug, as snug as you think a 2-year-old could get it. It's plenty tight enough. What happens is sometimes people will grab on that bypass and torque the heck out of it, thinking they're going to prevent it from leaking when they're actually causing a leak and possibly damaging the valve. So just barely snug on there. It's plenty tight enough that O-ring will hold the water back. So we chose to use flexible lines to connect to the water softener. You can really plumb this any way you want. Just make sure you're following the local plumbing codes. We like the flexible hoses. The key here is to follow these arrows again. So we've got the in from the city or well coming in here, and the out to the home going here. The common misconception is if you're replacing an old water softener that it's going to plumb in the same way. So don't always follow that. Make sure we're checking to make sure the water coming in from the city or well is going in on this side and out to the home on this side. At this point, now that everything's plumbed in, we can certainly open the bypass slowly. The inlet first, and nice and slow. The slower, the better. And it's going to be under pressure, so it's going to be a little bit hard to turn there. And then after that, we can slowly open the outlet to the home. Now the water's going to be pretty dirty. We're kicking up a lot of things when we're turning off the plumbing and turning it back on. So we're going to want to run a tap when we're all done here, closest to the softener preferably, and let that run until the water clears up. All right, next we're going to go ahead and install the brine well in the salt tank. We've got a cap in there and an overflow elbow we can use as well. But the first thing we're going to notice is this nut here that actually anchors the brine well safety float to the salt tank. So we're going to remove that, place that down into the brine tank. Line that up with the holes here, and go ahead and secure that nut just snug once again. All right, so you're also going to get a brine well cap, which kind of covers your brine well here, so that way no salt gets down in there when you replenish the salt. Also get an overflow elbow here. If you have a floor drain nearby, you can hook a 1/2 inch ID drain line to it and run it there, just in case something malfunctions and the salt tank overflows. It's definitely not necessary for the softener to function, but it's just there as a precaution in case something malfunctions there. It won't leak on your floor there. Also a note about the salt tank, while we're looking at it here, that we want to try to keep at least 1 bag of salt in there at all times. Beyond that, you can fill it up or just add one at a time. That is totally up to you. All right, next we're going to go ahead and hook the brine line to the control valve and connect that to the brine tank. The great part about the safety floats we include is a quick connect fitting. You can simply just push the brine line right into the brine tank and just push it in, give it a good tug, make sure it's secure. That part is done. Now on the valve side, we're going to be connecting into this brass nipple here, and we're going to go ahead and use these parts. Once again, we don't recommend using the screen. You can go ahead and get rid of that. But we do have a couple other fittings here. So we've got this fitting here, the compression fitting we're going to put on. After that, we have a ferrule fitting that goes on, and the pointing in will point towards the softener valve. Then there's a brine line stabilizer that inserts into the brine line. That is optional as well. So we're going to go ahead and take this over to the male threaded part, and that secures just like that. And you can put a wrench on that and give it a couple of turns to snug that into place. All right, so next we've got our 1/2 inch ID drain line. We're connecting to our drain bar back here. That's pushed snugly into place. Like we said, you're gonna need to get a clamp like this from the hardware store, and that will secure the drain line to the drain bar. Okay, so we're gonna wanna run that drain over. It can go up and over, believe it or not, and go up 5 feet above the unit as far as 25 feet over and back down again. We want it going into at least 1.5 inch drain. We do want an air gap. So we don't want this shoved down in there. You definitely want a gap between the drain and the drain line. That way we can prevent any backflow. All right, now we've got our brine line all hooked up and secured. Our drain line is hooked up, and we've got our bypass in the service position. We want to go ahead and plug the water softener in and go straight into programming. All right, so we're gonna notice that it flashes between the time of day and the gallons between backwash here. We want to go ahead, when the time of day is flashing, right now there's the gallons, we want to change the current time of day to 12:01 p.m. by simply holding the down arrow in until it shows 12:01 p.m. and then tap the recycle button, and then hold the up and down arrows together for 10 seconds until we see DF gal on the display. Now in programming, we want to go ahead and toggle ahead using the recycle button until we see C-24. This is how many grains your softener is. So if you have a 24,000 grain softener, great, you're already done with this step. If not, let's say you have a 32,000 grain softener, you go up to 32, or let's say a 48,000 grain softener, we'd skip ahead up to 48,000. So wherever we're at, set that appropriately, and then hit the recycle button again. And this is where we set our hardness. So we want to set this in grains per gallon, whatever your hardness is. If you happen to be on well water and have iron 2, for every part per million of iron you have, add 5 to the hardness. So let's say you had 10 grains of hardness and 2 parts of iron. So you would add 10 to the hardness for a total of 20 on the hardness. Or if you had 20 grains of hardness and 1 part of iron, you would set this to 25. So remember, iron always counts for 5 when it comes to this hardness setting, which is typically only on well water. Once we have set our hardness, go ahead and tap that recycle button again. This is our reserve. We want to leave that alone. Our reserve capacity is on 150 gallons. We want to leave that on 150. That way we're not running out of soft water midday. The DO, this is a day override. It's going to backwash no matter what on this DO in case the gallons don't kick in first. So on city water, we'd like to see that left on 14. On well water, we'd like to go ahead and lower that down to 7. Once we're done there, we hit the recycle button again, and regeneration time defaults 2 a.m. That is definitely a personal preference. You can set that to wherever you'd like when it does backwash for that current time, but most people do leave it on 2 a.m. Go ahead and cycle ahead. Backwash remains on 10, brine draw on 60, rapid rinse on 10. Brine fill is going to change according to the grain softener you have. So let's say you have a Mighty Max Mini softener. We want to lower that down to 2. Or a 16,000 grain softener, we're going to go ahead and raise that up to 4. If you have a 32,000 grain softener, we want to raise that to 7. If you have a 40,000 grain softener, let's raise that to 9. A 48,000 grain softener, you would want to raise that to 10. A 64,000 grain softener, you'd want to raise that to 13. An 80,000 grain softener would actually lower to 8. And once you're done setting your brine fill, we're going to recap one more time. Mini water softener would be on 2, a 16,000 grain softener on 4, 24,000 grain softener on 5, a 32,000 grain softener on 7, a 40,000 grain softener on 9, a 48,000 grain softener on 10, a 64,000 grain softener on 13, an 80,000 grain softener on 8, and go ahead and hit the recycle button. And that stays on default, and we can hit that one more time, and we're back to the time of day. To set your current time of day, just hold the up or the down arrow, whichever way you need to go. Let's say 1 o'clock for this programming purpose. So if it's 1 o'clock, just go ahead and go till 1 o'clock, and then simply just tap the recycle button, and you're back to in service, and you're gonna flash there between your current time of day, and it's gonna flash back to your gallons between backwash, which those gallons number will actually count down as you use the water until it backwashes, then which time it will reset itself again. Now that we're all programmed and ready to go, it's time we can add some salt to the salt tank. But the very first thing we want to do is add about 1 gallon of water to the salt tank. No more. You don't want to add too much water in there. That can actually cause some problems. So no more than 1 gallon. And then you can add the salt. Like we said previously, add at least 1 bag of salt. Beyond that, it's a total personal preference. You can fill it up or just do 1 or 2 at a time, but at least 1 bag of salt, softer salt, we want to try to keep in there at all times. All right, now that we're all hooked up here, we've got our brine line connected to our brine tank. We're all programmed in. We've got our drain line running to our drain. We've got our bypass in the service position on the inlet and the outlet. We made sure that our water coming in from the city or the well was coming in here where the arrow's pointing in, and the water going back out to the home is going out here. So like we said, you can keep at least 1 bag of salt in the salt tank is recommended. Beyond that, it's a personal preference. You can fill it up all the way or just add 1 or 2 bags at a time. The last thing we want to do here is do a manual backwash just to make sure we got no leaks to the brine line or the drain line. And simply how to do that is just hold this recycle button in here for about 5 to 10 seconds until we get into the backwash mode. This whole process takes about 1.5 hours. We recommend letting it go all the way through. The water softener does bypass itself internally during this process, so you still will have water in the home. It will just not be softened water at that time. Your water softener, when it's done, will start to soften your water a little bit right away. But it takes usually a couple of weeks, a few good backwashes to get to full 100% soft water. And if you are a customer of Aplus Water LLC, do not hesitate to call us with any questions about programming or installation or anything else to do with your water softener. Toll free at 1-877-477-5452. Thanks so much, and enjoy your brand new Fleck 5600 SXT Water Softener.